Hello and welcome to the Enabling Containers in Enterprise IT and the Cloud EcoCast event. Today's event is brought to you in partnership with Nutanix and Pure Storage and produced by ActualTech Media. Thank you so much for joining us on today's EcoCast. We've got a great event lined up for you today. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping that you need to know about. My name is David Davis of ActualTech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator on today's EcoCast. You should know that we do have a number of prizes we'll be announcing actually throughout the event. I'll talk more about the requirements to be eligible for those prize drawings in just a moment. We also want this to be an educational event. I mean, containers is a hot new topic that so many IT professionals are still really just in the learning stages of and learning about, and it's common to have a lot of questions. And so we encourage you to use the questions box in your audience console. You can see that it's on the left-hand side. I'll call your attention to it now. If you click on the word questions, you'll see a box there. You can type in your question. We'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session with each of today's presenters, and I'll be queuing up the best questions for those sessions, so get your questions in early. You should know that you may need to scroll down there in the questions tab to see the latest questions as they come across the line. So make sure that you scroll down if you're not seeing the latest information, or of course you can resize that questions window as well to make it larger. Thank you everyone for all the hello and welcome messages from across the United States and around the world. We do appreciate it. We also want this to be a social event. You can tweet directly from the console. The hashtag for today's event is ATMEcoCast. If you click on that Twitter icon, the hashtag will be automatically appended. And finally, we have a couple of resources there in the handouts tab, one from Nutanix. It's a URL that will take you to Nutanix.com, where you can sign up for the Nutanix test drive and the Pure Storage PDF slides, the full slide presentation from today's presenter is there in the handouts tab, so you can go ahead and download that PDF now if you would like. So I did mention some prizes. We have 3 Amazon $500 gift cards we'll be announcing throughout the presentation, so make sure that you stay tuned for those prize announcements. To be eligible for the prize drawings, you must be on the live event. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. Winners do have the option to make a donation to selected charities, and all prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to ActualTech Media. You can read the full prize terms and conditions there in the handouts tab where it says ATM prize terms. Now, until COVID-19 is beat, ActualTech Media will be donating $500 to Direct Relief for every MegaCast, EcoCast, and Summit event that we run. Direct Relief is a charity that supports frontline healthcare workers with the critical supplies that they need. So if you would like to donate to Direct Relief, of course, they would welcome that and we would appreciate it. But ActualTech Media will be donating for every EcoCast like this one that we run. So thank you for your support of our events. We've also partnered with the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund and One Tree Planted in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can visit gorilla.guide to download free IT educational books. These are full ebooks that you can download. There's no cost for any of them. You can download them for free. They're great resources if you want to stay up to date on the latest and greatest in enterprise technology. Again, the hashtag for today's event is ATMEcoCast. You can follow ActualTech Media on Twitter, and feel free to follow me as well, David M. Davis. I'll be tweeting about this event and, of course, all of our other upcoming events and, you know, things that are going along or things that are happening in the technology industry. You can subscribe to ActualTech Media on the top right-hand side of your console. It's there that you'll find links to the ActualTech Media LinkedIn channel, our Twitter page, our YouTube channel, and of course you can subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast produced by ActualTech Media over in the iTunes store. We've been posting our latest and greatest content primarily over on LinkedIn, so make sure that you follow us there. Now, before I introduce you to our first presenter from Nutanix, I want to do a little bit of stage setting, and I've got a couple of polls I want to get your feedback on. Now, containers are a hot topic. Everybody's talking about container technology, cloud native, Kubernetes, things like that. So first, let's step back and let's talk about why. Why are we interested in containers? I mean, I remember when virtual machines were all the rage, right? We were talking about moving from physical servers to virtual machines and how they were going to just revolutionize, everything in the data center. And now we're talking about moving from virtual machines to containers. So why? What's the big deal really with containers? Well, they're fast. I have to admit, they are much faster to bring up, to boot up. They're much faster to scale than a virtual machine would be. They are agile. I mean, in a single command, you can bring up thousands of containers. And so this tremendous agility, of course, is what powers things like Gmail and Netflix. They all run on containers. They're very scalable. In a single command, I can go from 20 containers to 2,000 containers. And I can also use things like autoscalers to scale up my container workload as my application workload demands. They're portable. I can take a container from my Mac desktop and I can run it in AWS. I can run it on premises, in Nutanix. I can run it on a Windows machine potentially. So they are very portable and they're very tiny as well. Lightweight is the term that people commonly use because there's no operating system inside the containers. They share the kernel with the host that they run on. So containers are lightweight, and that's what makes them fast. They also, in some ways, tend to be more secure, although, of course, there are container security threats as well. But because you don't have that operating system inside of the container, you don't have as much patching to do of your containers to keep them secure. But containers are not without challenges. It's not just a silver bullet that I can simply, hey, let's move all our applications from VMs to containers and our problems are solved. It doesn't work that way, right? There's still, of course, there's a learning curve with containers. It's not easy. It's not just a push button simple. Containers are complicated, and they take some fair amount of education. We talk about We talk about Kubernetes, of course. Kubernetes as an orchestration tool to orchestrate your containers, and that's really crucial if you want to have this sort of scalability. That's what people think about when they think about containers. Really, they're thinking about containers with Kubernetes or some other similar orchestration tool on top. That's what makes them so scalable. But orchestration alone is not enough to solve the challenges that need to be met in the enterprise. We still need enterprise-grade features that we think of having with our virtual machines, for example. And I'll talk more about what I mean by that exactly in just a moment. We also will need to migrate our applications, for example, to containers and cloud native, and that can be painful in many ways. So what are these enterprise-grade features? Well, we talked about orchestration with Kubernetes, but we also still need all the traditional enterprise-grade features that we have for our virtual machines, like data protection and disaster recovery. We have to back these up. We have to be able to restore them. Yes, most of them are stateless, and the data is stored in a database somewhere. But on the other hand, you still need the containers, right? You still need the applications that are in the containers. You might not have to back up every single one of them if they are stateless, but you will have to back up the images. You need some sort of data protection, and you need some sort of disaster recovery plan if something happens. You need enterprise-grade storage features. You need enterprise-grade networking features. You'll hear from Pure Storage today. What they're doing around container storage is going to be really, really interesting. Also, what Nutanix is doing around container storage and networking and data protection. You need enterprise-grade monitoring and migration tools to help you to get into your containers or move applications to containers. You need some sort of troubleshooting tools, all the typical things that we think about in a virtual infrastructure. You need those for enterprise-grade containers. And of course, consolidated management. I mean, you don't want to have a data protection tool for containers and a data protection tool for virtual machines, for example. You don't want to have container storage and then virtual machine storage. You want to just have storage or data protection or migration and monitoring tools. You want to have a single solution that does it all. And with that, I want to ask you, have you adopted container technology at your company? And if so, how? Where are you along the adoption curve? Are you testing containers? Are you doing development with containers? Are you running some applications in containers? Are you running as many production applications as possible in containers? Or are you still learning about containers at this point? And I will share the results of this with you. I won't call out, your names, of course. So this is an anonymous survey, but I do want to see what the audience is doing around containers and where you are in the adoption curve. So I'll give you a moment here to answer that question, and then I'll share the results with you. All right, thank you everyone who responded to that poll question. If you didn't respond, just select the option there on the screen. It's a quick, easy, one-click survey, and I'm going to go ahead now and share the results of this with you. And look at that. So this isn't unexpected. I mean, 58% said they're still learning about containers, and I think that's great. I still feel like, to some degree, I'm learning about containers. 15% said they're testing containers. That's awesome. 6% said they're doing development with containers. 17% said they're running some applications in containers. Kudos to you. Great job of being ahead of probably a lot of companies out there. And 1% out there said they're running as many production applications as possible in containers. So that is awesome to me. So very good. Thank you everyone who responded to that poll. Then one more poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter, and that is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing solutions at your company? Again, this is just kind of a broad, high-level question. Primarily on this event, we're talking about containers, but if you're attending a webinar like this, most likely you're doing some shopping or at least learning and research for new solutions that you might be purchasing at your company now or in the future. So we're just curious about your time frame for those. All right, excellent. Thank you everyone who responded to that poll question. We do appreciate it. And now it's time to kick off today's EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Sean Roth. He is the Director of Marketing, or Director of Product Marketing at Nutanix. Sean, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Thanks for being on the event today, Sean. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on. So my segment today is going to really focus on the enterprise cloud native journey as it pertains to Kubernetes. So, I think we've seen over the past couple of years, Kubernetes sort of rise to dominance in the orchestration space for containers and cloud native technologies. And there's a lot of heavy lifting involved, clearly, because it's a fast-growing and very deep technology. So really what I think my segment will be ideal for would be for IT operations professionals and cloud admins, perhaps, to who are just starting to execute on their company's strategies to go cloud native. Just to have a look at what's involved really in building a cloud native environment on-prem. So with that, we'll jump right in. More specifically, let's talk about the cloud native journey a bit and some of the challenges along the way. I do have a segment within my presentation that looks at Kubernetes and will identify some areas for you to consider, making sure you have a focus on simplifying those areas. And again, from everything that we've seen out there, for IT operations folks, this is a big challenge, and there's a lot of pressure from developer groups to be able to create infrastructure and provide resources exactly when they're needed, and to be able to keep pace with software development in sort of this new mode of operation here. And then finally, we'll talk about what Nutanix offers to enterprises that are going cloud native and building Kubernetes environments. Nutanix Karbon is a Kubernetes management solution, so we'll talk a bit about that. We want to focus on some of the attributes that have to do with infrastructure, which is really where Nutanix plays. But as you're looking to build a cloud native environment on-prem, you'll definitely want to consider having infrastructure that is easy to deploy and can serve up the resources that Kubernetes will need. And as we all know, Kubernetes really uses IT resources in very different ways than do legacy applications. So having an appropriate level of automation built into your lifecycle management of Kubernetes and storage, security, monitoring and observability, for example. These are all really critical to consider. The challenges, as I mentioned, are really figuring out how to use your existing infrastructure, if you can, to build a Kubernetes environment on-prem. And a lot of times that do-it-yourself approach will end up stretching out to 6 to 8 months, as we've seen with certain customers. And there's a lot of heavy lifting involved. And I think overall it's a good idea to really consider other approaches to infrastructure, like hyper-converged infrastructure that scales a lot more smoothly, can take more of a building block approach to this. And because of a lot of these challenges in figuring out how to build this whole new infrastructure on-prem and to get Kubernetes configured and up and running properly, I think a lot of folks turn to the cloud, and the public cloud does an excellent job of making Kubernetes incredibly simple to use. The UIs are super user-friendly. Everything below that in the stack is completely managed by the service provider. It's deceptively simple if you take a public cloud approach, and obviously many enterprises are getting started in the public cloud with deploying some applications at small scale and leveraging the cloud. And many actually do have a primary focus on public cloud's containerized application deployment because of that. But there are good reasons for running Kubernetes on-premise. And in some industries, and your company may be in that particular industry where you've got some constraints around where you can run your applications and where your data would live. And so there's several good reasons for choosing to build a Kubernetes environment on-prem. Cost efficiency is one of them. When you consider scale and some of the other resources that you may need for a particular application, it's not always cheaper to run those applications in the public cloud at scale. And so, compliance is probably the example that comes to mind the quickest, because, again, if you have constraints around where you can keep your data and where you can run certain types of applications that involve, sensitive data, then you're probably subject to regulatory compliance that is going to compel you to run this on-prem. So that's an important consideration too. Just getting more efficiency out of your data center. It was mentioned early on, kind of in the initial context for this webinar, that containers usher in this new level of efficiency, resource utilization that has to do with sort of their size and how you're able to carve up existing resources, whether it's on bare metal or on a particular VM. You want to get the most out of your existing infrastructure investment. I think that's an important consideration here. And finally, performance. Sometimes the public cloud may not give you the IOPS and low latency that you need for a particular application. Personally speaking, I've seen this not to be a very common case, but it's entirely possible. But the reality is that a lot of enterprise organizations really have a multi-cloud approach. Everything about containers and cloud-native technologies it involves some kind of flexibility. You know, the ability to take a workload and seamlessly move it from one environment to another. And so running applications or having a footprint in the public cloud in addition to your own on-prem environment is an advantage. You've got a lot of flexibility there. So that seems to be the common approach. So let's talk a bit about Kubernetes and the cloud-native ecosystem. So if you have it in mind that you're going down the path of building your own environment on-prem, and you're going to deploy containerized applications in your own data center, you know, Kubernetes is by far and away the dominant orchestrator here, and everything seems to be really built around Kubernetes. And when you look at what Kubernetes does and how it's architected, you probably end up focusing a lot just on pods. You know, you get to the point where you've operationalized Kubernetes, and you know, the pod basically is an encapsulation of an application's containers and other resources. And so, you know, there's this declarative model of carving out resources for your applications, and it's really easy when you look at CPU and memory resources. You can simply set requests and limits, but you also have to consider that it's not so easy in terms of networking and storage, and those are areas that have been identified as major challenges by the CNCF. So security, monitoring, and storage and networking, and I'm sure my counterpart from Pure Storage is going to focus a bit on some of the challenges around storage in cloud-native environments. But you have to look at all of these other areas where it's not as simple as writing a declaration for how much of that particular resource you want to carve out. So it's important to have some focus on networking, on monitoring and logging, application management, and availability. Now, there's a huge ecosystem around Kubernetes in all of these different areas. You know, everything from databases to CI/CD pipelines, security and governance, observability, storage, networking. It's amazing how many different technologies there are out there that you can leverage, and many of them have open source offerings, and a lot of the companies that have developed these technologies started off as open source and then kind of moved to build commercial offerings that involve more functionality and so forth. It's just an incredible amount to choose from, and as you move to address areas like storage, networking, security, and monitoring and so forth, consider that you have an incredible amount of choice. So, what do you ultimately do, and what are some of the other considerations that you would make in order to bring some of these technologies and configure them within your environment? One key thing to note is that Kubernetes itself has several different versions out there. There are many. There are sort of many takes on Kubernetes and orchestration platforms that have Kubernetes at their core. What you want to make sure is that you've got one that enables a native experience. So you don't want to necessarily be locked in with some proprietary elements, and you want to be able to use technologies in the ecosystem and build applications on a version of Kubernetes that are easily that can be easily moved from your environment to another Kubernetes environment if you don't necessarily know what is running there or where that might be. You definitely don't want to have proprietary elements involved. That can complicate things, especially as far as how your code is built. So if you can run it on vanilla Kubernetes, then you should build an environment that will mirror that. And so a CNCF certified distribution of Kubernetes, that's gone through conformance testing, that's really what you should seek out. And so being able to integrate those technologies in the ecosystem focused on storage, networking, security, and monitoring, that's of critical importance here. And so you want to facilitate the easiest possible integration of that. The Kubernetes, as I mentioned, there's a lot of heavy lifting to do to be able to, you get through all of your day one operations and day two management tasks. And really, we see time and time again there to be a lot of friction between development teams that are racing ahead to build their applications and deploy them, and then IT operations, which is sort of racing to catch up and being able to deliver what's needed by their software developers. So that's why Nutanix has created Karbon. So Karbon is our take on Kubernetes simplified. And so it's a management platform that ultimately takes a lot of the heavy lifting in configuring and managing Kubernetes and abstracts it away so that you've got workflows around a lot of your day-to-day management and cluster configuration that can be done in a single click. And so what we offer enables you to deploy a production-ready Kubernetes cluster in less than 20 minutes. I mentioned previously that the public cloud, AWS and Google Cloud and Azure, that they're very good in terms of their user experience and making things intuitive and easy to use, and that's ultimately what we wanted to provide users who are looking to deploy Kubernetes and containers on-prem. So that's basically our, simplicity is one of the core Nutanix values, and something that's given us a lot of success in the market for infrastructure early on. And so we took those concepts and built them into our Kubernetes management solution. So one of the other things, and as I mentioned, it's really important to be able to integrate technologies such as your container storage interface and being able to have persistent storage for your containers, networking, service mesh, logging, security. It's really important to be able to integrate all of those components into your environment. And so what we offer is a solution that is as complete as we can offer, from the infrastructure all the way on up. And I'll talk a bit about that in subsequent slides. And then giving users an experience that is really like the native Kubernetes user experience. So we make standard APIs available, and there's no lock-in. So again, if you build software on Kubernetes, managed by Karbon, then you can easily take those containers and migrate them elsewhere to another Kubernetes environment without having to worry about things breaking. So as I mentioned, it's incredibly easy with Karbon to deploy highly available Kubernetes clusters in just a matter of minutes. And we have created these very easy workflows that allow you to kind of templatize your deployments and then manage your environment using those templates if you need. Scalability is made very easy. Upgrades, that's another pain point when it comes to Kubernetes management, because as I mentioned, Kubernetes is very fast evolving. We're seeing releases on the order of 4 times a year, and those are pretty significant releases. So there is a big push to upgrade the version of Kubernetes along with the operating system on that particular node. And so we enable push button upgrades without disruption. Again, being able to leverage integrations with other technologies is a big advantage, and so we work a lot with partners in the cloud native ecosystem. We look at opportunities to not only go to market together, but to develop joint solutions that we can offer to solve a problem where the user knows that it's been tested and it absolutely works together. The latest release of Karbon involves 3 major enhancements. So we're able to deploy Kubernetes in air-gapped environments. So if you have no network connectivity for security reasons, then this is something that you can still do in a data center that is physically isolated. We integrate with Nutanix Prism, so just having a central UI as opposed to a whole bunch of different interfaces to do various things. We wanted to create an experience where you don't necessarily have to go to the Karbon UI to manage Kubernetes and your clusters. You can do this through Prism Central. And then, as I mentioned, just enabling upgrades with a click of a trackpad, a click of a mouse. It's really a huge advantage because there are a lot of steps if you do this manually, and that will save a lot of time and headache. And finally, what we offer with Karbon. So Karbon is an integrated component of Nutanix AHV, which is our hypervisor. So in this diagram that you see on the left, we can integrate different technologies in our portfolio to create a whole cloud native stack where you can run containerized applications alongside traditional applications that would run on a VM. So we have a series of solutions around persistent storage that address 3 major storage classes. We enable workload automation through a product we have called Calm, and can monitor the whole environment and execute a lot of the management functions via Prism. So again, it's not so much just a single piece around automating management capabilities in Kubernetes, but it's really providing a lot of the key tools and technologies that go into building a complete cloud native stack on-prem. And this is I'd say this is an industry segment that is evolving by leaps and bounds, and it's still relatively new. Expertise is not as widespread, obviously, as with VMs, which have been around as a commercial offering for probably, I'd say, close to 20 years, if I had to guess. So again, a new space, and I think automation is your friend. Knowing that you could still provide a native user experience for all of your users for Kubernetes, and having solutions where it is possible to integrate your storage, your networking, security, monitoring, and observability, and having all that work together is a huge advantage in getting to where you need to go. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I want to thank you very much, and again, apologies for some of the glitches with the slides earlier on. Would really love to take your questions, and thanks so much for having me on the program.
Absolutely, yeah, great presentation, Sean. We do have some questions for you from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? I want to call everyone's attention to that question there in the slides window while we do some Q&A. So let's see, the first question that came in, they're asking, I guess just at a higher level, what kind of applications do you see running best in containers on Karbon? And do you see companies moving applications from their VMs running on the Nutanix platform into containers?
That's a good question. I'll offer up a few bits of insight I think that will answer parts of that. So, the whole notion that everybody seems to be very focused on containerized applications today, and this is sort of like the you can look at it as virtualization 2.0, or the next frontier in IT. But really, VMs are not really going to go away as containers gain more traction. I mean, there may be a reduction in the amount of applications that are deployed on VMs. I think we're definitely seeing that. And in the case of databases, and we've seen with some customers that customers are just fine running the database as it's currently implemented, and don't want to refactor that for containers. So I think it's probably best to look at everything that's available to you. If there are applications that you're fine running on a VM, no need to refactor those for containers. But a lot of applications now are being not just containerized, I would say, which it's entirely possible to create. To take a piece of legacy code, put it in a container, and run it, as opposed to rebuilding it from the ground up based on a microservices architecture. So it really depends. I think a lot of the traditional three-tier applications, enterprises that have the internal resources and are looking to really capitalize on some of the scalability and agility gains from having a containerized application, are doing so. But again, in the case of databases, I have seen a lot of customers just keeping those running as they are on VMs. Overall, as I mentioned, this is something that's possible if you are a Nutanix customer and you have us deployed in your data center and you are going cloud native. You can run your containerized applications alongside your virtualized applications in the same environment.
Okay.
So hopefully
okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good insight there. Thank you. I like that answer. Very honest, very candid. Let's see. Next question that came in. I'm not sure if you can answer this one. They're asking if there are Nutanix Karbon APIs or plugins, for example, for the Red Hat OpenShift platform.
Good question. I think so. I think it is possible to run OpenShift on top of Nutanix. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it's not as far as I know, not certified to work, but it should be possible. With regard to the APIs that are required, the next version of Karbon will have some enhanced APIs that we offer. But again, it's not something that we typically see. We certainly don't, prevent anyone from trying to run OpenShift on top of Nutanix. Okay,
nice. Next question they're asking, does Karbon use Calico for networking?
Another great question. So, currently, no, but again, in the next version coming up, that's a major integration that we're going to be featuring. So, not currently, but yes, very soon is the answer.
Okay, nice. And then I like this question because I'm curious about the answer myself. So Scott's asking, what's the minimum configuration for a Nutanix footprint required for Karbon? And how is Karbon deployed? Like, do you download it and install it into AHV, or exactly how does that work?
There's really, from a user standpoint, or generally a customer standpoint, there's nothing really additional that you have to do to use Karbon. So it's currently integrated in AHV, and all you really have to do as a Nutanix customer is to turn it on. So in other words, just firing up the UI and going from there.
Okay. Okay. Very nice. And so if somebody wanted to try Karbon out for themselves, what's the easiest way to do that? What do you recommend?
So Karbon, currently, and again, it's tough to answer because we're kind of on the cusp of, some advancements here. As I mentioned, we are coming out with a Calico integration very soon. And with regard to trying Karbon out, aside from just seeing a demo that we would set up on a one-on-one basis with you, we'll now have the ability to go through some simple workflows in Karbon as a kind of a test drive. So again, that's several weeks out, but that's going to be available for folks that are really interested in getting their hands on and really seeing what Karbon is about. And so they can go through the process of configuring a cluster, of setting up storage, and also just deploying a very simple WordPress application.
Okay. Okay, nice. Ricardo's asking what new features are coming soon. I know you mentioned more APIs, Calico integration. Anything else you want to share?
I think the Calico integration is going to be the star of the show in the next release, and obviously there's so many different areas that we are trying to address with subsequent versions of Karbon. Having kind of an enhanced some enhanced security capabilities, CIS benchmarking, for example, enhanced APIs. And so I'd say, those are the three major things that we have on the immediate horizon.
Okay. Okay, nice. And so I know a lot of companies, when they deploy Kubernetes, I talked a little bit about in my intro the challenges related to having, all the enterprise-grade features that they need, storage plugins, networking, management, logging and troubleshooting. So it sounds like with the integrations around Karbon and all of the other Nutanix tools like Calm, you all have really solved that, or you're on the way to solving that. Is that a fair statement? That ultimately is the goal. But again, with this particular ecosystem, there's an amazing open source community. There's so many different approaches to addressing the critical areas of, especially around infrastructure, storage, networking, security. That's always top of mind. So, again, being able to deliver those capabilities in ways that still preserve some of the flexibility around, bringing in the open source or other commercial offerings of your choice. That's pretty important to us too. Again, you want to create something that can be used flexibly and in a way that's like most valuable to the customer. So again, it's there's a fine line between what you can provide, and obviously the big advantage for us is that we've got all of these components that are designed to work together and are integrated well together. But still, there is there's very much an open door to bringing your preferred solutions into the mix and having them work. And that's the beauty of Kubernetes too. Everything designed for Kubernetes should ultimately work in any Kubernetes environment out there. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been really interesting, very educational. I learned a lot. I know the audience did as well. Sean, thank you so much for your presentation today.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you to Nutanix for supporting today's event. If you click in the handouts tab right there, there's a link to Nutanix.com. And once you're there, you can go in and actually inside products, you'll find a link right there for the Karbon Kubernetes service. It's right there underneath automation and orchestration. And you can download a solutions brief and sign up for a demo. your own personal demo, and I encourage you to do that and learn more about it. I look forward to trying out Karbon for myself. Looks very cool. And with that, it's time for our first gift card giveaway. We have an Amazon $500 gift card, and that is going out to Michael Pointkowski from Pennsylvania. Congratulations, Michael Pointkowski from Pennsylvania. We've got 2 more gift cards still to give out on today's presentation right after our next presenter from Pure Storage. And with that, it's time to introduce our next presenter on today's Container EcoCast. That is Mr. John Owens, Principal Field Solutions Architect for Cloud and Next-Gen Applications at Pure Storage. John, take it away.
I'm John Owens. I'm a Principal Solution Architect for Kubernetes and container integrations at Pure Storage. And today we're just going to talk about how we've gone from the transition of dev, test, web services, stateless type applications towards more persistent apps or stateful apps. And that includes things like data pipeline, being able to take logs and things and pass them through different mechanisms, message queues, those types of applications that need to save data, maybe not forever, but it does need a persistent place to put the data and have it fail over and still be there. Those types of applications, AI, ML applications like Jupyter Hub that need to be able to access and share data across users for different types of applications of testing, different kinds of code and models and all that fun stuff that happens in AI. And then finally, the one that is kind of pushing a lot of this is enterprise apps. So off-the-shelf apps, yes, there's more and more coming out in containers that are built for Kubernetes, but being able to run things like databases, whether it's a open source MySQL, for example, or Postgres, or even Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, those types of things. Many customers are asking now, how do we do this? And all the pieces and parts are there. And honestly, like Kubernetes provides that high availability, the scalability on demand to be able to run stateful apps that you would want. And that's what's drawing people towards this. Things like network security and isolation that are built in and really, part of, and it's all API driven. And that same kind of availability and storage as a service is delivered when you use Pure Storage for those types of applications. And so the parts are all there, and it really comes down to is that the gap is with skills. Like, how do we take advantage of this? And so I'm here today to kind of hopefully share a little bit about what we can do there. Obviously, the challenges in the past have been for persistent type applications is that lack of automated failover and provisioning, and also being able to scale alongside it. So scale independently in a more cloud-like fashion where now I'm able to repave and reuse compute nodes without data being tied to those nodes. I can now scale independently. So if I need to delete compute nodes, whether they're VMs or physical servers, I can now scale, and the data will be independent of that. So we don't have to repopulate or re-replicate the data if we are going to delete and rebuild those nodes. Another good thing is that there are so many options, and even though the names are changing and they're going to change again, is that we're able to work with the core of Kubernetes and provide the same services for all these different types of flavors, I think is the best way to put it, of Kubernetes. So diving in, because I do only have 30 minutes, and hopefully I'll be able to get this in time, but storage is obviously an important part of persisting data. That's why Pure Storage is involved in this. A little history lesson there is that there was an in-tree driver for a lot of the cloud-based systems, being able to build that and push it into the actual Kubernetes, code was good initially, but obviously could not scale, especially as more and more storage vendors wanted to be able to provide a way to integrate into Kubernetes. So Flex Volume Driver then came out. It was good, and it actually allowed every storage vendor to provision or build their own type of driver, but it also had some security things with root and things like that. And it wasn't every flavor of Kubernetes, like if you look at the previous slide, may have done it in a slightly different way, which made it very hard to support. And so that's why we are now talking a lot about CSI, the container storage interface. It obviously provides a set of APIs that anyone can integrate into. And, I'll talk a little bit more about how we did that, right? So Pure Service Orchestrator, the latest over the last year and a half version is obviously a CSI driver, since CSI is GA. And even though we did have a driver before that, but this is what you would use going forward. And it provides the ability to scale, provide storage on demand for containers, scale across multiple systems seamlessly, use file and block on shared infrastructure, and then automate that failover is very important, right? So we're scaling, we're providing a simplicity that you'll see during the demo, and hopefully you'll see like how easy and on demand that makes it happen. So the elastic scaling, a single line to add new array or device to the pool, and then smart provisioning, being able to make that decision for you. So you're no longer, if you're the consumer or you're the platform team or DevOps team, whoever is actually using Kubernetes to deploy applications, you're not tracking or having to decide where the volumes need to go. We are actually calling the REST API that's built into the flash array or the flash blade and decide based on performance, based on capacity, and based on the health of the array, where's the best place to put that volume. And it is an abstracted layer. So we're able to now see flash arrays and flash blades, multiples, or even the Cloud Block Store, which is in the cloud-based product, is all, since they all have the same APIs, we just abstract the out of band. Is just management traffic only. Pure Service Orchestrator is just an orchestrator. It is not a proprietary file system that relies on tracking blocks across all of the devices or anything like that. It is using native Linux tools to mount volumes. It does have a default file system that you can install that's part of Linux. It's XFS, but you can't change that to ext4 if you really love that. But that allows you now to focus on what kind of storage do I need for my database. It is low latency. I can just say I want pure block, and the rest is handled for you. The creation of volumes, the creation of the host objects, iSCSI, Fiber Channel, IQNs, all of that is done for you. Analytics, let's say I'm running Elasticsearch or Splunk or something like that, and I want to be able to ingest a ton of data at once. The FlashBlade with its very high bandwidth throughput may be the best choice. So now I'm going to say I don't need to know. It needs to go on FlashBlade number 1 and create NFS shares or anything like that. All I need to know is my app needs bandwidth. I'm going to use PureFile, and I need 10 terabytes or 100 terabytes, and it's all done for you. It is, we do work with the ecosystem. We have lots of partners that we work with. So, depending on what you're using for your Kubernetes distribution, we can integrate with it quite well. And finally is, this is just a short example, hopefully. This is our internal analytics pipeline that is built off of our development process. So there's tons of logs being generated by all the tests we do. So if someone does a commit, there's all kinds of automated tests that run against the code this is for the FlashBlade team. And it generates a lot of data. And in order for us to scale well without having to have hundreds of QA engineers go through logs and find out what failed, or if something didn't work right after a change in the code, we built this system. And so the people who built it before Kubernetes was really a thing, and it was still running on containers, right? It was still a nice way to be able to deploy that software, but this was all the shell code that they had to use to be able to provide persistent storage to those containers, which is not very cloud native. So PSO, where it fits in, right, is anything that needs a mount point. So whether it's a block volume from a flash array or a file system, NFS file system from the FlashBlade, you're able to now take that and mount it to /data or MNT/data in syslog and write all your logs there, those types of things. Anything that can speak object where you're going to natively code to talk to, the FlashBlade directly because it has its own object S3 compatible object interface, just go ahead and use those. So, Python code or, Spark has a S3, and, more and more of the analytics software, so Splunk and some of those, they all have a built-in object ability now. This is an example of a customer so if you don't want to listen to what Pure uses it for, is this is a customer that uses a FlashBlade with Pure Service Orchestrator in order to mount and log everything that's going on in a very large compute farm, if you see that number there. And their comment was, it just works, right? They POC'd the FlashBlade and it just works. So they rolled out PSO, one line to install, and it just manages everything and allows them to focus on, collecting those logs into that Elk stack that they're using in Prometheus and being able to see what's going on in this compute farm in a quite an easy way where they're no longer they almost forget that it's there, right? So that's a very nice thing. So it gives them that cloud-like operations. So I'm gonna jump into the demo, and we'll see if I get this in time. So first thing we're gonna show is a distributed database called CockroachDB, and it's going to roll out and provision PVCs based upon availability zone. So this is something like, if I'm going to use stateful apps in a way that is highly available across maybe racks or zones and things like that, I'm going to build this. So what I'm doing is I'm tagging all my compute nodes with east and west, and then the storage as well is tagged as east and west. And this is a concept called topology. It's available in CSI. We kind of enact it, I think, in a unique way where it allows us to be compatible with the scheduling engine that Kubernetes uses to schedule the pods. So let's jump out to the demo. There we go. And these are the two storage arrays, and we're going to install PSO first. We're going to helm install PSO pure CSI F demo values. So that will get pod, that will install PSO. You can see the containers are starting up. It starts a REST API translator. That's the provisioner. It has some pods that we've created that work alongside the CSI, and it is a way for us to provision storage. So nothing's happening on the storage arrays yet, you'll notice here, but what we're going to do is we're going to filter this down so you don't have to look at old Oracle demos from somebody else. There we go. We have our volumes. And all that is needed to install PSO, if you saw, I kind of blew past that install command, is this one values file for Helm, right? Where it shows, here's my management endpoint, here is my API token, which allows it to log into the array. And then also the management endpoint of the second array, and it kind of, we could keep creating pools that way. So it's pretty nice and straightforward. And then we have these value tags, east and west. And I can have flash arrays and FlashBlades all in the same pool. That creates two default, two storage classes. So there's pure block and pure file. Obviously one goes to the other. Now you'll see here I'm using one called delay binding. It's using this concept called wait for first consumer. What this means is that we're going to let Kubernetes decide where to provision the pods based on CPU, RAM, and also a node affinity, saying in my application, I need it to be spread across two availability zones. So if we do kubectl get nodes show labels, is that all my compute nodes are labeled east and west, and our application is actually has an affinity, a node affinity to say, make sure you start, enough in east and enough in west. And since we have 4 replicas, we will get, because I've done this before, 2 in the east and 2 in the west. And storage from the east and the west. So you saw that we had all that, and now we're going to apply the application. Okay, it's starting up. See there, it waited a second because it was actually waiting for the scheduler in Kubernetes to decide where to place those volumes. You can see there's already 2, and this really is just, it's already provisioned, but the GUI just needs to refresh. And usually when I'm impatient, there it goes. So we have 2 on each side, 100 gigs each per the spec that was in the YAML file, right? So we have that up. We actually should have the application running, get pod. You can see that it's running, but it's not ready. The way that this application works, oh my gosh, is k apply, actually, ./init. You have to init the database, basically telling it, hey, it's okay to start. Once it's started, we can scale and do all kinds of cool stuff with it, but that's just a way that that application works, and it's not too horrible to use. So get pod, they're all showing running and ready. So 101 ready, and now we should be able to see the interface of that database. All right, you can see there's 4 nodes, and if I kind of scroll through this, you can see there's 4 nodes in there. Each one has its own volume, so it comes to roughly, it's 100 gigabytes each times 4, but there's some overhead, so we're looking at 371. That's part of the database, the way it provisions out that storage. But raw, it's 400, but that's a 371. And now we're able to see the app. It's up and running. We have their statefulness to it, and it is ready for production. Well, let's see if we can scale. So we can do a scale command. We can that stateful set replica. Oops, cockroach. Replicas equals, we're at 4 now, so let's go to 16. And we'll start to see storage be provisioned. So we got 4 there, but if we wait a second, they're starting to provision out. Pod. The new containers are all creating, and you'll start to see this number go up. The volumes are appearing over here, depending on how fast the web interface goes. So we're already up to 6 live nodes, and this under replicated, that's just the database saying, hey, I need to put my data over on the other side. All right, so now they're up and running. Almost there. So one question I'd get, so some Q&A that we're going to look at here is, how do I prevent, because I talk to a lot of storage teams, how do I prevent a developer from using an entire storage array or requesting an entire storage array? So Kubernetes has a very nice quota system that allows you to say, this user, based on their RBAC, they only get 1 terabyte, and they can divide it up however they want into as many little volumes as they want, or they can do one big one. You can even limit the number of persistent volume claims they can have, but that that allows you to actually provide role-based access control and also quotas on those consumers, right? So it looks like we are up. We have all of our volumes, and one of the other common questions. So if we're looking at a little Q&A that I get is, can you resize those volumes? The answer is yes. Let's find the command for that. It is right here. I apologize, I will not memorize this command because it's so long. So what we're going to do is we're going to change each of those volumes. You saw initially there were 100 gigs. You can see there are 100 gigs over here on the array. And we're going to resize them all. And on the array, in a second, you can see they're starting to show 2000, 2000. So we changed them all to 2 terabytes. Now you may notice the application itself is not noticing that space because it is block. It's not going to recognize it. So if we actually do a git pod, you can see it's running and it's been up for 5 minutes. The problem is that it's not going to recognize that new space in this type of volume. Now there are other, like you can use read write many volumes, it'll recognize the space right away. But today we're using read write once. That means one container per each volume. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually run this second command. You saw this up here. And this is going to do a rolling restart. There we go. And that'll do a rolling restart of all the nodes. So you'll see these to start to change. You know, they've been up for 5 minutes while I've been talking, but they'll start to change. And then this overall volume is already starting to go up, right? So it's 1.4 terabytes, and we'll see this increase as we answer a few more questions. So one other question that I see is, this is not an extra licensed item. This is not an extra charge, right? So if you already have a Pure Storage flash array or FlashBlade or even Cloud Block Store in AWS, you can use this today, no extra charge. It just integrates into the REST APIs that are built into the array. But yes, if there's obviously more questions or anything, you can see that the space is increasing. And so really it is being able to take advantage of these features that are built into Kubernetes will allow you to run stateful apps today in a very nice and simple way within Kubernetes. There's no reason to avoid them. And now you're able to do that. So if you'd like to know more, obviously you can visit, my blog. I have samples and all kinds of stuff like that on GitHub. Also go to purestorage.com/containers if you don't want to type that whole thing. If you do /containers, it'll take you to that. In addition, go to GitHub and search Pure Storage Helm, and you'll find our Helm chart and the instructions on how to install it, which was that one line, that Helm install command. Very easy, straightforward. And if you have any issues or questions, you can post them there, or you can find me on Twitter, and I'm more than happy to help you. So thank you so much for joining this webinar. Hopefully, if there's more questions that come afterwards, just let me know. Thank you very much.
All right, great presentation, John. Thank you so much. That was really cool. I love the live demo, how you deployed that and showed us the results. We do have a poll question on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Pure Storage solution? We'll just leave that up here while we announce our final set of prize winners. And I appreciate all the questions that are still coming in for John. We will route those to John. John will have to get back to you after the event because we are about to wrap up with today's relatively short EcoCast. With that, it's time to announce our final 2 Amazon $500 gift card winners. All right, here we go. Gift card number 2 goes to Ryan Peck from Texas. Congratulations, Ryan. And gift card number 3 goes to Eric Pounders from Arkansas. Congratulations, Ryan Peck from Texas and Eric Pounders from Arkansas. You are the final 2 Amazon $500 gift card winners. Thank you, everyone who responded to the Pure Storage poll question there for additional information. If you haven't filled that out, of course, now's the time to do it because we're moving on. That is to just remind you before you go to subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. And if you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming event, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. We would love to chat with you. And finally, I hope that you'll join us on our next megacast. It's going to be a big event. It's the Data Protection, Disaster Recovery as a Service, and Disaster Recovery megacast. We have expert presenters lined up from too many companies to list there. You can see them on the screen, and we'll be giving out 5 brand new iPhone 11 Pro. So I hope that you join us on that megacast. Immediately following this event, you'll be automatically redirected to the events homepage for ActualTech Media where you can register. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on today's Container EcoCast. I hope that you learned a lot and have a great day. See you next time. Bye-bye.